Guys, I cannot believe how many nerds out there are gatekeeping books. And I've done it before, and you probably have too. But you would think in the reading world, which is dying, in a society where being an intellectual, being a feeler, being a thinker is not really a cool thing anymore, we would come together and be like, anyone and everyone, please read a goddamn book. I don't care how you do it, what you do with the information. If you get everything wrong and ruin everything, please come. Instead, all the logic bros have decided to link arms together and gatekeep everything related to literary fiction and science fiction and fantasy, if I'm being honest. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the different theories on why you should gatekeep literature and see if they are valid, because I think one of them is. But across the board, we've been educationally traumatized. We were put in a competitive public school environment, and you were either dumb or smart. And then you were maybe thrusted into a family who didn't give a rat's ass about books, or a friends group, or a town that was super conservative, or didn't really align with your values as a blossoming thinker, writer, artist, whatever. And because of all this, we've had to build these suits of armor that we constantly existed. And it doesn't help that the general disposition of a writer or a person who loves to read deep into philosophy, literature, psychology is an introvert. And I get why people gatekeep, because so many great things in art and life have been ruined, have been misconstrued by people, have been monetized. And this goes back to the concepts that Jean Baudrillard talks about in Simulacra and Simulation, and really most of his work. And what really pulled me out of being one of these nerdy, insulated gatekeepers was teaching public school English. And I remember when I finally understood that everyday people can take literature and transform it into something beautiful. Because yeah, every single year I have a couple kids who I get into reading and I make them lifelong readers. But it wasn't until I moved schools, and this was years ago, I moved to a new school, and when you get to a new school, usually they give the new teachers like the worst classes. And so I had all the worst classes, and it was really hard. I'd have kids throwing things at me, and I'd say something and they'd be like, "Shut up, you're a retard." And I'm like, "Oh my God." But I had tried to make them read Animal Farm, but it was way over their head. The talking animals really didn't like vibe with these classes. And so I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm pissed off. I love Animal Farm. How'd you guys not get that? And so I was like, okay, we're going to do Lord of the Flies. And I had 6 classes. And with 4 of the classes, it was just another book. Like, I came in with this energy of everybody. I get up there and I'm talking and having fun assignments, and we're acting it out and we're doing theories like, what would you do in this situation? 4 classes, it didn't really hit. But my worst class, the kids that were calling me a retard, tripping me, stealing my stuff, stealing books, destroying books, they somehow got really into it. And I couldn't believe it. And the breaking point happened when suddenly they realized and connected with empathy for the first time, because adolescent individuals are very self-centered. Everything is about them. And in the class, they were acting like anarchists. They didn't believe that I had any authority or anything to say. And so when we started reading the book, and they realized that this group of kids who are kind of a rich group of white kids gets put into this terrible, situation. And then what happens? Their brains started to explode and they started developing empathy. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever experienced. Like, there was this kid in class that they would bully all the time, like kind of in secret, and I'd have to be defending. Then other kids started defending him. Then it stopped altogether for the rest of the year. Because I think they started thinking, because I started putting him through simulations about what would we do and what would we do with the weaker individuals. And suddenly this class was on board with me for the rest of the year. And I still have kids from that class. And these kids were getting suspended for drugs, for fighting. They had terrible home lives, like super inner city neighborhood in Las Vegas. Lots of problems. I was teaching in a portable. 45 kids in like the smallest room you could imagine, like no room to walk between the desks. Total transformation in the class. These are people who others would say they can't learn literature. They're going to ruin it. There's no point to teach them. Like, I know so many teachers and so many people who feel that way. They're just lost causes. They're going to be a ditch digger, street sweeper one day, or end up in prison. And so let's go back to that root cause though. They lacked empathy. And so many logic bros out there, people who only view reality through logic, because yes, it is important in life and death situations and when you're thinking about your finances and big important decisions to use the logical frame of reality. But there are also subjective frames of reality and deeper emotions and empathy that are accessed through loving relationships and time spent out in nature and inner reflection and meditation, prayer, whatever the hell. And it requires you to believe in something bigger than yourself. It requires you to escape logic. This is why most addicts are overthinkers, because they'll come up with every single excuse and outthink any solution. And that's why something like AA has this belief in the higher power and all these kind of, you could say, irrational or kind of leaps of faith, because that's what it requires. That's what it requires most of the time to pull yourself out of a terrible heroin addiction. But that's the same with logic. That's the same for people who've been trained to be computational, for people who've been traumatized, people who in this society have been trained to be negative. Like, for instance, go to Reddit and check out people like Joe Rogan's forum or whoever. And if you have a problem with Joe Rogan, that's fine. And there's a lot of things you can critique about him and other people. But the amount of vitriol and negativity that people just spew on YouTube, on Reddit, and it's through logic and they intellectualize everything is insane. And then anyone who is enjoying themselves and growing, they are automatically put down and seen as dumb. It's such a wild and bizarre thing. For instance, you guys know what rednecks and the guys who were fans of Joe Rogan were like before Joe Rogan? Before they started smoking weed and started thinking and reading books? They were brutal motherfuckers. They were the domestic abusers. They were the kind of sharp edge of society. And now they're, listening to 3-hour podcasts, and maybe they're not learning anything and they're misinformed or whatever, but everything now has a gatekeeper. So developing empathy is important. And when you start to do that, you realize that everybody can learn. Everybody can at least hit a baseline level of spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical education to be a good, nonviolent citizen in society. And yeah, there are some outliers. I'm not an idiot. And that's what we have prison for. That's what, we have a whole system for that. But giving up on everyone and going insular has always been a problem. And books are the most transformational tool in the world. You can develop all 4 of those intelligences or learn what you need to do all through books. And in my humble opinion, the only thing we should be worrying about is education. I'm not talking about public school education or whatever, but the amount of energy people, first of all, put into putting other people down is crazy. I understand there are scam artists out there and people, and it's good we have a system of checks and balances on the internet to kind of vet and see who is good and who is bad. No big deal. But all these logic bros, when you look at their life, they aren't building anything. They aren't nourishing anything. They aren't creating anything. Their entire life is a net negative. And we've been conditioned to think, because of Reddit, because of polarization, that caring about certain political issues or these things and getting angry about them actually does anything. And, we're adding our public voice into the pool of opinions. But writing under an anonymous profile and gatekeeping online, or spewing out your garbage opinion, means nothing. It's literally lost. It's not until you get skin in the game and make a video, write a blog post, put your identity and some oomph and some permanency behind something on a real platform, that's when you get into the game. I'm not trying, here I am gatekeeping what people should and shouldn't do. But education on a human by human level is attainable. And if you sit and you focus really hard and put all your energy into the abortion issue and researching online and getting angry about it, that's cool. But what are you really going to change? I have already, in the couple years I've made this channel, a side project, I've activated thousands of readers, hundreds, if not thousands of writers, people who wouldn't be writing if they didn't see my channel. What's the eventual impact of that? That number eventually is going to be in the millions. And I'm very ambitious. But when we pull ourselves out of gatekeeping and logic and focus on building and creating, that's the type of numbers we can do. One person helping thousands of people is nothing, but thousands of people helping thousands of people, suddenly those multiples start looking really insane. And I don't know if it's like a gender thing, because have we been conditioned to gatekeep our entire life? Not to get into gender issues too deeply, but when you look at a younger age, boys were allowed to do certain things, girls weren't allowed to do certain things. We were allowed to feel and act, and I'm not advocating that boys should dress up in dresses or do anything like that. But what I am advocating for is that there is a psychological priming and closed-mindedness that builds upon gatekeeping. And The second thing I want to talk about, which I think is the most important thing with gatekeeping and where I can see the gatekeeper's point of view, is priming. And so many studies have been shown that first impressions and how you're primed about a situation will reflect most of the time how you maybe feel about it for the rest of existence. And unless something major happens to flip your impression, that's how you always feel. And so I want to give you guys a personal example of my own gatekeeping and why I thought, and maybe still think, it was a correct decision. So in the Cormac McCarthy community, really in the YouTube community, there is a YouTuber named Wendigoon who has millions of subscribers. And occasionally he makes videos about books that get millions of views. And I made a video that I took down because I decided I was going to flat out, and I'm still working on this, watch his 5-hour breakdown and kind of critique him and add stuff to his video point by point. Instead of just making a video saying this sucked and this and that, I'm actually going to, I decided I want to add to the conversation. I want to maybe find people who like to watch him and then just kind of follow along with him and kind of add what he missed. But in this video, I watched a clip where Wendigoon was on this podcast with a bunch of gun YouTubers, and they were saying things like, your video was better than the book, and it was hard to read and it was boring and this and that, because Wendigoon's video was basically a summary, and he's an entertaining and humorous guy, and he could make a 5-hour summary really fun to watch. And so my basic argument was that they were primed, and where the level that you are primed at is most of the time, for most people, the level that you'll remain at forever. And that actually you'll most of the time only go downstream and create more simulacra of that. And so a simulacra is a copy of a copy. So an easy example of this is when you watch a movie on the screen. It started in a screenwriter's head. Then he put that down, and it was a copy of a copy on a piece of paper. And then it gets passed around with more simulacra. Then it's filmed with actors who are a simulacra, who are faking. Then we watch it, and then we interpret it, which is another simulacra. So there's this long chain down. But when you look at nature and you don't think of anything, you just interpret it clearly, there really isn't any simulacra. And a lot of the time, the closer you are to the original source, the more potent and authentic it is. And that's what we really kind of want. And so something easy to gatekeep is Cormac McCarthy, because he is really good. And when someone reads a Cormac McCarthy novel like Blood Meridian, and they're like, man, Blood Meridian, bro, so much violence, that was crazy. You're like, oh my God, there was Hegel, Nietzsche, Schelling, Kant, Plato, Peirce, all the best philosophers, all embedded in there, and McCarthy did it on purpose. Did you catch the Gnosticism and the tarot? You're like, oh my God. And if you start at the level of a summary and you're not told any of these things, one could argue that eventually most of those people aren't going to, be reading secondary sources about, Wittgenstein's influence on Blood Meridian. Most of them are just going to read it and turn it into a simulacra and signal that they are smarter than others, or use it as this kind of societal thing to show status. And for a while, I thought that was really bad, because I've been traumatized by some of my favorite things being corporatized, being, turned into endless simulacra. I grew up being a free skier. I was park skiing and stuff back in 2002, 2003 is when I started. And it was the early days, super raw video online. And now it's in the Olympics. I watched it evolve. And I remember when rich kids and everyone started doing it, and it started becoming cool. And that's when I was dude, I can't do this anymore. And in 2011, I started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and did it for years. And I watched that turn into what it is now. Same with yoga. I was on the tail end of yoga, but yoga started as one of the greatest personal transformation systems of all time. And now it's, Lululemon leggings and girls trying to work on their ass and dudes trying to get laid. And everyone's just working on asana, and no one's meditating or doing pranayama or any of the things that actually transform your life. And so I have seen what stuff has turned into because of bad priming. And for a while, I held the wrong opinion that the more people we could save, the more people, in an ideal reality, we get people in as high up as possible. That from day one, they're doing pranayama and meditating. But unfortunately, people need to be sold. People need to be able to go to a yoga class and feel the yoga high by just doing some crazy sequence for 90 minutes in a hot room. People need to be the cool guy on Instagram who can do a backflip on skis. And some of those people will remain that forever. But I have a buddy who got into free skiing, And he was an uber rich kid, arrogant. He was in it for all the wrong reasons. And he was at my local ski hill. And I would think that I would like gatekeep, and I'd be like, oh man, this is kind of weird. Things are changed now. But guess what, you guys? Now he's grown up, he's matured, and he has a family, and he has kids that he takes skiing every single day. He's just a normal dad. And him getting into free skiing, something he wouldn't have done if it wasn't for the videos, it wasn't for the culture, all this stuff. Now his family is getting outside. They're having a fun time. They're spending time together, keeping a strong family unit. And I view the same, I've come to terms with the same thing is happening with books. 95% of people who read the book because of Wendigo and are going to remain sleepers. They are Manchurian candidates who we have to awaken. We have to tell them what to think. Wendigo got him there, and he could have done more. He could have, done a better job, but he did get us a new group of people who have read the book. And if they were open-minded enough to read a book about, a band of scalp hunters who are also rapists and these other things, they're probably going to be open to us talking about, hey, did you catch like Nietzsche in there? You know about Nietzsche? What do you think Judge Holden represents? Deeper questions, deeper analysis. Eventually has to happen. And education doesn't happen overnight, especially to get to the level that a lot of us are at. I don't know if you remember where you started, but I've been in this game for over 16, 17 years now. It's easy for me to pontificate on the noumenal or Pound's objective correlative. Oh God. See, here I am. Can't even say it. See, but someone who's at moment one, who doesn't understand any of kind of the symphony of literature and philosophy and how it all interconnects, they're just trying to have fun. They're just trying to learn and think. And they have to start person by person. And it's hard. The first time, you hear about Nietzsche and it sounds fun, but then you read him and hear about the concepts and it blows your mind. And then it takes a while to sink in. And I would read a certain philosopher like Nietzsche or Hegel or Schelling, and I would read all their stuff, and I would sometimes have to wait months to let it sink in. I wouldn't read anything else. Like maybe I'd read some fiction and poetry, but I would have to almost embody it. It doesn't just happen instantly because that's logic. That's why the gatekeepers are here. They have all the information in their brain, but they've never felt what it feels like to have your life transform with Cormac McCarthy, then walk as a man or woman with the new mentality in the world, because they believe that they are always right, that they don't have to change anything, that they know everything about the world. And once again, it's coming back to empathy. Cormac McCarthy knows a lot about the world. Octavia Butler, she knows a lot, and she can teach us a lot through her science fiction. And, speaking of gatekeeping, science fiction and fantasy nerds, no offense, I'm a nerd too. They are some of the worst gatekeepers. Like when Cormac McCarthy wrote The Road and released it, and it's a dystopian, speculative science fiction novel, people were so upset in the science fiction community. He thinks that he can come in here and do all of this and take our sales. Many science fiction authors are going to starve because of Cormac McCarthy this year. Instead of thinking that Ian Kavanaugh, when I was 14 years old, The Road came out and I read it and I loved it. And I started looking, what is speculative fiction? And now I would say that I'm a expert. I've read over 100 books easily that are dystopian and speculative fiction. And it's one of my favorite micro genres. All started with Cormac McCarthy. How much money? I've bought, like I said, at least 100 books from those authors. I've put thousands of dollars back into the movement. And The Road has been read by millions of people. And all of them are now more open-minded to the genre. I also don't think people understand how dire the circumstances are. And not to get all doomsday conspiracy here, but the consolidation of power that's going to happen when AI takes over and all of that, I don't know if we're going to be able to get that back. There's always been an opportunity all throughout history for us to get some swords together, get some guns going, and put some people in check. But with the surveillance state and AI and how great weapons are now, we're screwed. If things go bad, there is seemingly almost no way out of that. And so turning people into more empathetic, kind, and intelligent individuals seems like should be the number one priority. We spent $8 trillion on the war on terror. How many people could we have educated with $8 trillion? Just the amount of programs and things and ideas that could have been, sought after, and all the energy. $8 trillion is a lot of money. But how many great thinkers over at Raytheon and all these other places have wasted their life making weapons to just go kill brown people? How many? What could their brain power collectively with $8 trillion done? And so now is not the time to be gatekeeping everybody. I don't know if you've seen the two bozos that are running for president this year and the two bozo political parties they're a part of, but we do not have an intelligent collective unconscious and conscious in the world right now. So I want to give you guys a challenge right now. I want you to think of what you hold most sacred, those authors, that music. And I don't care how many people have snubbed you. I don't care how many people said, oh, I don't like that. Like, that was okay. Yeah, I liked it. I don't care how much that has happened. Each one of you can activate 10 people this year in 2024 with the 6 months left, easily. What do I mean by activate? I mean, shift them into a growth-oriented mindset. And maybe it isn't through books. Maybe it's by getting them to work out, because all four are connected: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And so if you can get 10 people started with a growth-oriented mindset in just one of those categories, that's huge. Obviously, I wish I could preach, like, get online and make it scalable. But no, 5,000 people will probably watch this video within the next year. If we got 50,000 more people in a growth-oriented mindset, that is a start. I'm not here promising a utopia or any of these things, but if you think we are slowly declining, that is the most we can probably do without me becoming preachy and a cult leader and hoorahing you guys too hard to making a change in the world. But we cannot be gatekeepers. We cannot take it personally when people don't want to be involved with what we want to be involved with and become a hollow shell. I have people leave me nasty comments, talk shit about me online all the time and tell me what I'm doing, you're wrong, he's a grifter, whatever. But I believe in you. I believe in myself. I believe in our elders, the people who have left us great pieces of literature, and the future writers, thinkers, and feelers who can also change the world. And I also know, as I talked about earlier, there is millions, if not billions, of Manchurian candidates, sleepers, waiting to be awakened. You know, it's like Dune 1984. Father, the sleeper has awakened. Who's going to wake him up? It's not going to be the Logic Bros. It's not going to be all the assholes on Reddit and on YouTube leaving shitty comments. That doesn't wake anyone up. It creates a cycle of negativity. It's going to be you. So get up, get after it. Tell me what you're up to. And always know that I will always have your back.